This is RaikouRider, and this is the deck that I ran last Friday night at Friday Night Magic. It is a 4-color aggro deck that uses the power of Changelings to play all of the best creatures in the format all in the same deck. This deck can play Goldmeadow Stalwart, Wren's Vanquisher, and Lorwyn all in one deck. Starting with those creatures, we got 4 copies of Goldmeadow Stalwart, and that's as far as our 1-drops go for now, but I'm going to see if I can work Flamekin Blade Whirl into the deck. But the deck list is tight. I'm also working on putting more 2-drops in here besides Wren's Vanquisher. If I had Tarmogoyf, that would be obvious, but I am still deciding on what my other 2-drops are going to be. I've considered putting Primal Rage in here, but I don't know what to cut. Most of our creatures are at the 3-drop slot. Right now we have 3 copies of Kitchen Finks. Kitchen Finks is a very good aggro card, and it's a very good anti-aggro card. Next we have 3 copies of Lorwyn, not playing 4 because if you have one in play, any Lorwyn cards you draw are just blank cards, but it's the best 5/5 for 3 in Standard and possibly ever. We have Torian Mauler, quite possibly the best Changeling in Standard, aside from Chameleon Colossus, which is kind of expensive for my taste. I'd play it if I had it, but it just doesn't fit the curve to play a whole set. I'd probably play 2. It gets bigger every time your opponent plays a spell, so basically it says, answer me now. If I had 4, I'd play 4, but I only have 3. Mirror Entity is the only other really good Changeling. I would probably play Chameleon Colossus in place of this if I had it, but it's a really good finisher. Moving on to the non-creature spells, it's pretty much just Changelings and Burn. I'm playing 4 of each of the good Changeling removal cards. 4 Nameless Inversion is obvious. 4 copies of Crib Swap because it's a Changeling, and it's great for dealing with big creatures like anything Mana Ramp will throw at you. It's an answer to Chameleon Colossus, it's an answer to Ona, it's an answer to basically big creatures. But the biggest answer that we have is Chameleon Colossus. We have 4 copies of Incinerate, which is self-explanatory, 2 mana removal. Flame Javelin is a little bit of an odd pick in here, considering that we have 4 colors, but we have, I believe, 13 red sources in this deck, so we'll often be able to cast this for 3 or 4 mana. Scarscale Ritual keeps this deck alive after turn 5 or 6. A lot of times it'll finish them off by turn 5 or 6, but against a lot of mid-range decks, this gives it the edge that it needs to stay in the game. A deck that plays this many colors would have to have one of the most greedy mana bases you can imagine, but it actually gets its mana pretty consistently. Because I have 13 Changelings in the deck, I can afford to play the various tribe lands such as Auntie's Hovel, Ancient Amphitheater, and Gilt-Leaf Palace instead of playing Pain lands. I would play more Murmuring Bosks if I had them, but I don't. We're playing 3 copies of Brushland, and 1 copy of Horizon Canopy, and rounding out the mana base we have 2 copies of Gemstone Mine, which is a solid card because you can get any mana you want out of it on turn 1. It's really a solid card, even though you can only get mana out of it 3 times. That's all the times you'll need to get mana out of it in this deck. Moving to the sideboard, I had a lot of trouble against fairies. So my sideboard is mainly Fairies Hate. Against fairies, I usually take out some incinerates and put in sudden shock. Vexing Shusher, self-explanatory. Rift Sweeper, very good against decks playing Rift Bolt and decks playing Ancestral Vision. Oblivion Ring is to deal with creatures that we ordinarily couldn't deal with, such as just anything that's bigger than 4/4. Like Doran. It's also good at dealing with Bitter Blossom, which is a humongous problem for this deck. And 3 copies of Wrath of God for mainly the mirror match and the creature decks. Although the double white makes it hard to cast, so I've been thinking about putting Pyroclasm in here instead. Other cards I had considered for this deck were Troll Ascetic. I had considered a number of different drops. I had considered Woodland Changeling instead of Mirror Entity. I had considered Blades of Velisvel instead of Crib Swap for Curve. I had considered Tarfire for more goblins to reveal. I had considered Squeaking Pie Sneak instead of Kitchen Finks. I had considered quite a few things. One thing that I'm thinking about putting in this deck is Primal Rage, because I've been having problems dealing with Bitter Blossom. So anyway, this is a 4-color aggro deck. I call it Racial Profiling. This has been RaikouRider, and I'll see you later.